You may have spent more of your life than you realize waiting for someone else to make you happy, not in loud ways, not with demands or complaints, but quietly, in the space between the morning and the phone call that does not come, in the hours when you hope someone will think of you, in the slow disappointment that settles when another day passes and no one arrived with what you needed. You were taught, perhaps without words, that joy is delivered, that if you are patient enough, kind enough, present enough, someone will notice and bring you the warmth you have been missing. And sometimes they do, but not often enough. Not in the way you imagined. And each time they forget, something inside you grows heavier. There is another truth, one that is not cruel, but honest. Happiness is not brought to you. It is cultivated, and the hands that tend it are your own. 1. Waiting gives power away. When you wait for someone else to make you happy, you are handing them something they were never meant to hold, not because they are careless, not because they do not love you, but because no one can carry the weight of another person's inner life. It is too much. It shifts too quickly, and even those who try will eventually set it down, not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. You may have spent years believing that joy would arrive through the door if only the right person remembered to bring it. That peace would settle if someone noticed you more often. That loneliness would lift if others filled the space around you with warmth and attention. And perhaps, for brief moments, it worked. Perhaps their presence did bring relief. But you also know what happened when they turned away, when the phone did not ring, when the visit did not come, when the words you needed were not spoken. The happiness collapsed. Not because it was false, but because it was borrowed. What rests outside of you will always be fragile. It will depend on weather you cannot control, on moods you cannot predict, on lives that move according to rhythms that are not yours. And so you wait, you hope, you adjust yourself to make it easier for them to remember you. And still, the waiting continues. This is not a failing. It is simply what happens when responsibility for peace is placed in hands that were never designed to hold it. The truth, quiet but not unkind, is that your happiness cannot be managed by anyone else. Not your children, not your friends, not your partner if you have one. Not because they do not care, but because they cannot see inside you. They cannot know what you need before you know it yourself. They cannot tend to what only you can feel. And so the question becomes, how much longer will you wait? Not as accusation, not as pressure, but as honest inquiry. How many more mornings will you wake and scan the day for signs that someone else will bring you what you seek? How many evenings will you sit with disappointment, wondering why no one thought to call? There is another way, not louder, not more effortful, but steadier. It begins when you stop handing your peace to others and bring it back into your own care. When you notice that joy does not require permission, that calm does not need to be delivered, that you have always had the ability to tend your own heart, not because you are alone, but because you are capable. This is not about refusing love. It is not about closing the door or pretending you need nothing. It is about recognizing that what you wait for outside can also be found within, and that when it is found there, it does not collapse when others turn away. Peace becomes yours again. Not borrowed, not conditional, yours. And from that place, strangely, connection becomes lighter. Because you are no longer asking others to do what only you can do. You are simply meeting them, person to person, without the silent demand that they complete you. The power you gave away can be quietly reclaimed, not through force, not through withdrawal, but through the simple recognition that you were never meant to wait. You were meant to rest. and resting begins when the waiting ends. 2. Expectation creates suffering. There is a quiet ache that lives in the gap between what you hoped would happen and what actually did. It is not loud, it does not announce itself, but you feel it each time the phone stays silent, each time the visit is postponed, each time someone you love forgets the small thing you thought they would remember. The ache is not the event itself. It is the distance between your expectation and the world as it is. This is how suffering begins, not with cruelty, not with loss, but with the belief that life should have unfolded differently than it did. You wanted them to think of you more often. You wanted the afternoon to feel a certain way. You wanted your body to move as it once did, or your days to carry the rhythm they held before. And when reality arrived in a different shape, something inside you resisted, not with anger necessarily, but with a low, persistent disappointment that colors everything that follows. This is what craving does. It takes a moment that simply is and measures it against a moment that never was. And in that measuring, peace dissolves. The heart that expects is a heart that cannot rest, because expectation is always leaning forward, always waiting for the next thing to confirm or deny its hope. It turns every encounter into a test, every silence into a verdict, every gesture into evidence of whether you matter in the way you believe you should. And reality, patient and indifferent, continues to unfold according to forces you do not control. People forget, plans change, energy fades, attention drifts, not because the world is hostile, but because it moves according to its own nature, not your design. You cannot command the river to flow uphill, you cannot ask the autumn leaves to remain green, and you cannot insist that others organize their lives around the shape of your longing. This is not meant to wound you. It is simply true. What stabilizes the heart is not getting what you want. It is releasing the demand that things be other than they are, not with resignation, not with bitterness, but with the quiet recognition that clinging to how things should be only tightens the ache. When you stop asking life to match your expectations, something shifts. The world does not change, but the friction between you and the world begins to ease. The phone still may not ring, the visit still may not come, but you are no longer braced against it. You are no longer measuring each moment against an invisible standard and finding it lacking. This is what equanimity feels like. Not excitement, not satisfaction, but steadiness. A kind of inner balance that does not depend on circumstances arranging themselves in your favor. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you harden. It means you stop demanding that care be returned in the exact shape you imagined. You allow people to be as they are. You allow days to arrive as they will. And in that allowing, the heart softens. Longing loses its grip. Not because you have been given what you wanted, but because you have stopped insisting that peace depends on it. The ache may still visit, but it no longer governs. And in the space where expectation once lived, something quieter takes root. Not hope, not certainty, just the ability to be here, without needing the next moment to be different than it is. 3. Attention does not equal worth. You may have noticed how the day feels lighter when someone remembers you, when the text arrives, when your name is spoken, when someone asks how you are and waits to hear the answer. In those moments, something inside you relaxes. You feel seen, you feel real. And then the attention fades, the conversation ends, the silence returns, and with it a subtle unease, a quiet question that was not there before. Do I still matter when no one is looking? This is the cost of measuring your worth by how often you are noticed. Attention is not steady. It does not arrive on schedule. It moves according to forces you cannot predict: someone else's energy, their distraction, their own quiet struggles. It has nothing to do with whether you deserve to be remembered. And yet, when it is absent, the mind begins to wonder: did I say something wrong? Have I become invisible? Am I no longer enough? The more you rely on recognition to tell you that you are worthy, the more fragile your peace becomes, because you are building your sense of self on ground that shifts beneath you. You are asking the world to confirm what only you can know. This is not to say that being seen does not matter. Of course it does. We are human. We long to be known. But when that longing becomes a need, when your inner steadiness depends on whether someone else turns toward you, you have given away something that was never theirs to hold. Your worth does not live in their gaze. It does not increase when they remember you or diminish when they forget. It simply is. Quiet, constant, present whether or not anyone is paying attention. The question is whether you believe that. Because if you do not, you will spend your remaining years scanning the room for signs that you still matter. You will measure each day by how many times you were thought of. You will feel yourself shrinking in the spaces where no one seems to notice. And the insecurity will grow, not because you are worth less, but because you have tied your value to something that was never designed to hold it. Self-respect does not wait for applause. It does not need to be earned or validated. It is not louder when others agree with you, or quieter when they turn away. It is the ground beneath your feet, the knowledge that you are here, that you have lived, that your presence carries weight simply because it is yours. When you stop asking others to confirm that weight, something shifts. The need for recognition loosens. You are no longer constantly checking to see if you have been remembered. You are no longer interpreting silence as evidence of your irrelevance. You begin to rest in your own authority, not in arrogance, not in withdrawal, but in the quiet certainty that your worth is not up for debate. It does not depend on being seen. It does not require an audience. And strangely, when you stop clinging to attention, relationships become easier, because you are no longer silently asking others to reassure you. You are no longer measuring their care by how often they think of you. You are simply here, and they are simply there. And the space between you is lighter because it is no longer weighted with unspoken demands. You are enough, whether or not anyone says so. 4. Joy must be created. Joy does not arrive on its own. It does not knock at the door while you sit waiting. It does not drop from the sky because you have earned it, or deserve it, or need it. It appears only when you meet it halfway, when you lift your hands and touch something that matters to you. When you engage with the world, even in the smallest way, and allow something to stir. This is not about effort. It is not about forcing yourself to feel better or filling your days with distractions. It is about recognizing that joy is not a gift given to you by circumstance. It is something you participate in, something that emerges when you are present to what is here, when you tend to what is in front of you, when you let yourself care again even just a little. You may have spent months, perhaps years, waiting for joy to return, waiting for the loneliness to lift, waiting for something outside yourself to shift so that life feels bearable again. And the waiting itself has become its own kind of wait, not peaceful, not restful, just a slow, quiet draining of the days. But waiting does not create anything. It only empties the hours. It tells the heart that life is elsewhere, that meaning will arrive later, that now is not the time. And the more you wait, the more distant joy becomes. Not because it has abandoned you, but because you have stepped away from the places where it might appear. Joy lives in small things. In the act of watering a plant and noticing the new leaf. In the weight of a book in your hands. In the smell of bread toasting. In the few words written on a page, even if no one will read them. In the act of arranging something on a shelf, simply because it pleases you to see it that way. These are not distractions. They are not ways to pass the time until something more important happens. They are the substance of life. And when you turn toward them, when you let yourself engage even quietly, even briefly, something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but unmistakably. Vitality does not return through grand gestures. It returns through small acts of participation, through touching the world and letting the world touch you back, through the simple recognition that you are still here, still able to notice, still able to tend to what matters. You do not need permission to do this. You do not need to wait until you feel better. You do not need someone else to give you a reason. The act itself is the reason. The doing is the point. And when you stop waiting, when you set down the belief that joy will one day be delivered to you, you may find that it was never as far away as you thought. It was simply waiting for you to move, to reach, to place your attention on something other than the absence. Not because you are trying to be happy, but because you are willing to be here. To engage with what is in front of you, to let life move through you again, in whatever small way it can. The waiting can end. Not because something arrived, but because you stopped insisting that it had to. 5. Fear of being forgotten. There is a fear that grows quietly in the later years. Not the fear of death itself, but the fear of disappearing before you die. Of becoming someone no one thinks about. Of fading so completely that it is as if you were never here at all. You may feel it when the phone stays silent for days. When your name is no longer mentioned in conversations you are not part of. When the people you once mattered to seem to move through their lives without needing you in them. The fear whispers that if you are not remembered, you were not important. That if no one carries you forward, you will simply vanish. This fear does not come from nowhere. It comes from the belief that who you are depends on being held in someone else's mind, that your life has meaning only if it leaves a mark others can see, that you exist fully only when you are thought of. But this is not true. You are not a story someone else tells. You are not a memory waiting to be preserved. You are here, now, breathing, aware, present in this moment, whether or not anyone is thinking of you. The fear of being forgotten is the fear of losing something you believe defines you. Your identity, your place, the sense that you mattered in a way that will outlast you. And when you cling to that, when you hold tightly to the need to be remembered, the fear tightens. Because memory is not something you can control. People forget. Time moves on, and no amount of effort will guarantee that your name stays on someone's lips after you are gone. But what if mattering does not require being remembered? What if simply being here, in this breath, in this moment, is already enough? Not because someone witnesses it, not because it will be spoken of later, but because presence itself has weight, because you are alive, because you see the light through the window, because you feel the quiet, because you exist, and existence does not need applause to be real. When you stop asking the future to hold you, the fear begins to dissolve. Not because you have been reassured, not because someone promised to remember you, but because you realize that who you are is not located in their thoughts. It is here, in the awareness that is reading these words, in the body that is sitting, breathing, being. Nothing more is required. You do not need to be remarkable. You do not need to leave a legacy. You do not need to ensure that your name is spoken after you are gone. You are enough simply by being present to your own life, by noticing what is here, by allowing this moment to be lived, even if no one else will ever know it happened. The fear of being forgotten assumes that your worth is something borrowed, that it must be confirmed by others in order to exist. But worth is not borrowed. It is inherent, and it does not vanish when attention turns away. You are here. That is not nothing, and when you rest in that, when you stop reaching forward, trying to secure a place in someone else's memory, something quiets. The fear loosens, not because you have been given certainty, but because you have stopped asking for it. You are present, and presence is enough. 6. Depending on others weakens peace. When your peace depends on someone else showing up, it becomes as fragile as their mood, their schedule, their memory. One moment you are steady, the next you are waiting, and in that waiting your calm unravels thread by thread, not because they are cruel, not because they do not care, but because you have tied your inner life to something outside your control. You have made your steadiness conditional, and conditions, by their nature, are unreliable. This is what dependence does. It turns peace into something borrowed, something that must be replenished by others, and when they are late, or distracted, or simply living their own lives, you are left hollow. Not because you have lost something that was yours, but because you never held it in the first place. You may have built your days around the hope that someone will call, that someone will visit, that someone will notice you are struggling and arrive with exactly what you need. And perhaps they do, for a time. Perhaps their presence steadies you, but then they leave, or they forget, or they are dealing with their own weight, and you are alone again, feeling the absence more sharply than before. This is not a failing of love. It is the nature of dependence. When you rely on others to maintain your peace, you are handing them a responsibility they cannot carry. You are asking them to know what you need before you know it yourself, to arrive at the right moment, to say the right thing, to fill a space that only you can tend. And when they cannot, the vulnerability deepens, because now you are not only alone, you are unsupported, and the mind begins to interpret their absence as abandonment, their distraction as rejection, their silence as proof that you do not matter. But what if your peace did not require their presence? What if it could remain steady and quiet, whether or not anyone thought of you today? This is not about rejecting connection. It is not about pretending you need no one. It is about recognizing that your inner steadiness is yours to cultivate, that it can be found in your own care, your own rhythm, your own ability to meet the day without needing someone else to make it bearable. Self-sufficiency is not hardness. It is not withdrawal. It is simply the ability to rest in your own company, to know that you can tend to what arises without waiting for rescue, that you can sit with loneliness without collapsing, that you can find small moments of calm even when no one is paying attention. And when you do, peace becomes durable. It no longer depends on whether the phone rings. It no longer rises and falls with someone else's availability. It becomes something you carry with you, something that does not need to be constantly fed by external reassurance. Freedom grows in that space. Not the freedom to be alone, but the freedom to be with others without needing them to complete you, to love without desperation, to connect without clinging, to allow people to come and go without your inner life collapsing in their absence. You are enough to hold yourself. You always have been. And when you stop asking others to do it for you, you may find that the peace you were seeking was never as far away as you thought. It was simply waiting for you to stop looking elsewhere. 7. Equanimity. Frees relationships. When you stop needing others to behave a certain way in order for you to feel steady, something shifts in the way you love them, not because you care less, but because you are no longer quietly measuring their affection. You are no longer interpreting every gesture as evidence of whether you matter. You are no longer waiting for praise to lift you or bracing against neglect to avoid collapse. Equanimity does not mean indifference. It means you have found a place inside yourself that does not rise and fall with someone else's attention. A place that remains calm whether they remember you or forget you, whether they speak warmly or turn away, whether they show up or disappear for weeks without explanation. This steadiness is not earned through detachment. It is not about hardening your heart or pretending you need nothing. It is simply the recognition that your inner balance does not depend on their consistency, that you can love someone fully without requiring them to stabilize you. And when that happens, relationships become lighter, because you are no longer silently demanding that they prove their care. You are no longer keeping score. You are no longer hurt when they do not respond as quickly as you hoped, or when they forget the small thing you thought they would remember. Their actions are simply their actions, not verdicts on your worth, not tests of their loyalty, just the ordinary movements of a life that is not yours to control. This does not mean you tolerate harm. It does not mean you accept mistreatment or pretend that neglect does not sting. It means you stop interpreting every absence as abandonment, every silence as rejection, every distraction as proof that you are no longer important. People are inconsistent. Their attention wanders. Their energy fades. They forget. They get busy. They turn inward. Not because you are unworthy, but because they are human. And when you meet that humanity with equanimity rather than demand, the space between you softens. Love, when it is no longer demanded, becomes voluntary. It is freely given, freely received, no longer weighted with the unspoken expectation that it must arrive in a particular form or frequency in order to count. You stop needing them to be different than they are. And in that release, you may find that you actually see them more clearly. Not as the person who should call more often or visit more regularly or remember you better, but as they are, flawed, distracted, doing their best, just as you are. Praise no longer lifts you as high. Neglect no longer drops you as low. Because your peace is no longer tethered to their behavior. You have brought it back into your own hands. This does not mean relationships no longer matter. It means they no longer govern. They no longer determine whether today is bearable or unbearable, whether you are enough or not enough, whether life feels full or empty. You remain steady. And from that steadiness, you can love without desperation, without the quiet ache of needing them to complete you, without the fear that their absence will undo you. The relationships that remain become lighter, not colder, not distant, but free, because you have stopped asking them to carry what was never theirs to hold. 8. Inner freedom is the true refuge. There is a peace that does not depend on anyone arriving, a steadiness that does not collapse when the phone stays silent. A refuge that no one can take from you because it was never theirs to give. This is not the peace you have been waiting for. It is not the relief that comes when circumstances finally align. It is not the calm that settles after someone reassures you, or the lightness that follows when you are remembered. That kind of peace is borrowed. And what is borrowed must eventually be returned. Inner freedom is different. It is not granted, it is not delivered, it is cultivated, slowly, quietly. In the small moments when you notice that your worth does not depend on being seen, when you realize that your day can hold meaning even if no one asks how you are. When you sit with loneliness and do not collapse beneath it, it grows in the spaces where you stop asking the world to be different, where you stop waiting for others to bring you what only you can tend, where you meet the silence not as abandonment but as simple quiet, where you allow the day to unfold without needing it to prove that you matter. This is not resignation. It is not the exhausted acceptance that comes after hope has been worn down. It is something steadier, something that does not require the future to save you, something that rests in the present, in the breath, in the awareness that you are here, and that is enough. You do not arrive at this peace by trying harder. You do not achieve it by forcing yourself to feel grateful or positive or content. It appears when you stop insisting that life owes you something, when you stop measuring each day against an invisible standard, when you let go of the belief that happiness is a destination someone else will guide you toward. Inner freedom is the recognition that you are already whole, not because you have everything you want, not because you have been healed or completed or made better, but because wholeness is not about addition, it is about release, about putting down what you were never meant to carry, the need to be noticed, the need to be remembered, the need to have others confirm that your life has meaning. These are weights, and when you set them down, not with bitterness but with quiet understanding, something opens. You are still here, still breathing, still aware. And that awareness, that simple presence, is the only refuge that will not leave you. It does not depend on mood or circumstance or the kindness of others. It is yours. It has always been yours. This peace does not announce itself. It does not arrive with fanfare or certainty. It grows quietly, the way light moves across a room in the afternoon, barely noticeable at first, but unmistakable once you see it. And it remains, not because you have earned it, not because you have finally done enough or become enough, but because it was never somewhere else. It was always here, waiting for you to stop looking outward and notice what has been present all along. You do not need to wait anymore. The refuge is already here. There comes a moment when you realize the waiting can end. Not because someone finally arrived, not because circumstances shifted in your favor, but because you have stopped asking the world to deliver what you can tend yourself. This is not about becoming harder. It is not about pretending you need nothing. It is simply the recognition that your peace does not live in someone else's hands, that your worth does not require their confirmation, that you are capable of meeting your own life without needing it to be different first. When the waiting ends, something opens, not dramatically, not all at once, but unmistakably. The days become lighter because you are no longer measuring them against an invisible hope. The silence becomes bearable because you are no longer interpreting it as abandonment. You are simply here, present, aware, enough. Self-sufficiency is not isolation. It is not the refusal of connection. It is the quiet strength that allows you to love without desperation, to be with others without needing them to complete you, to allow people to come and go without your inner life collapsing in their absence. You are whole already, not because you have everything you want, but because wholeness is not about addition. It is about release, about setting down what was never meant to be carried. The waiting can end, not because something arrived, but because you stopped insisting that it had to. And in that stopping, life continues, quietly, steadily, without needing permission to be lived.